uh, Go ahead and download the app or get online. That's how we'll do our review again this week. We'll be doing a few questions there to get started. So if you want to, go ahead and log on. I see there's a couple people that are already in. So opportunity for more to join our Kahoot before we get started on our class. Let's see. I can't hear anything. I assume that means that the overhead mics are muted.
Can you hear this?
Oh, there you are.
Okay, overhead mics are on.
Cool.
Okay, they're on now.
All right, and Roger, you're gonna have to use the feed from the computer or nobody on YouTube is gonna be able to see anything.
How do you do that? Can you hear me, John?
Yeah, I can hear you.
How do you use the feed not from the computer on the screen? I thought it was
Just like you're pushing charts,
Huh?
computer input rather than the camera input.
Where do I go to switch that? Choose
It's just another input. It's comp rather than cam 1 or cam 2. Might be on the row below.
But this is going to be on the Zoom meeting window, right? Where's that? It might be easier for me to just shut it down. I'm going to shut it down and try again here.
Nope, you should not need to shut down.
All right. Oops.
Not, wow.
I don't know that helped any.
No, that wasn't it.
I'm not seeing where to change this.
Stand by.
Oops. And then this jumps around.
I can remote in. I'll be there in a moment.
You got it? Oh, are you moving the cursor? Oh, that.
Scottish Kings, not the British service.
There you go, Roger. I changed it up in this session.
Okay.
So you should be all set on the video side, Roger. That's all you should need to do.
Alright, and now the program, it doesn't look like it. It looks like it's showing the screenshot. Well, it's showing the foods thing.
Yep, that's perfect.
Oh, okay. Good.
All right. We're a couple minutes late. I appreciate everybody's patience. We're going to try and run this class remotely. Aaron is not feeling well. So if you want to join our Kahoot, we got a few people in. I want to get a few people more in. We're going to start with that and review the first or the bulk of chapter 6 before we get started with our class. So go ahead and get Kahoot and put the pen in. And we'll run that. It seemed fun last time. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm going to try my best to continue to keep the class as interactive as possible. So the mics in the auditorium are open, and you should be able to comment on the class as we go, like normal. We'll see how that winds up working and how well that winds up working. But that's the plan as it is. All right. So we'll get a couple more people on Kahoot. You've got a minute. Go ahead and put that the game pin in at kahoot.it on your phone, and that's how we'll get started. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and go with it. Are we ready? Here we go. Let's see if I can get this to work. All right. Here's your questions. Again, this is our recap from last week. Follow along on your phone. Put the answers in. Here we go. Exodus 6:1, how did the Lord say Pharaoh would drive the Israelites out of the land? How did the Lord say Pharaoh would drive the Israelites out of his land? With a strong hand. That's right. All right. Second question. What was the covenant the Lord established with the Israelites according to Exodus 6:4? What was the covenant the Lord established with the Israelites? Yep, don't let the picture deceive you. Very good. Land of Canaan in Exodus 6:4. Very good. All right. The next question, what had the Lord heard from the children of Israel in Exodus 6:5? What did they hear? What did the Lord hear from the children of Israel? Groaning, absolutely. I think there was a bunch of the other stuff, but groaning is what he heard. Very good. Ooh, 3 in a row. Whoever MBF is. That's probably you, Beth, isn't it? Not sure. That's okay. All right. Multiple answers. What 2 ways will the Lord redeem the children of Israel in Exodus 6:6? What 2 ways will the Lord redeem the children of Israel? All right. Yeah, great judgments and an outstretched arm. With great judgments and an outstretched arm. Although I think it's the other way in the verse. Very good. Looks like we didn't get anybody with both of them. That's all right. What did God plan to give the land he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as? He gave the land, he gave it as a what? A possession. Yeah, a possession. Although I don't think an inheritance is wrong. That's not what was in the text in that verse. All right, ABS making a move. According to Exodus 6:9, why didn't the children of Israel heed Moses? Why didn't they heed Moses? There's 2 answers. There are 2 things that he said, so make sure you hit 2 of them. All right. A broken spirit and harsh slavery. Broken spirit and harsh slavery. All right. Next up, why did Moses think Pharaoh would not heed him? Why did Moses think Pharaoh would not heed him? All right. Yep, the uncircumcised lips. All right. Oh, on a streak. Two or three more. Who was referred to as the firstborn of Israel in Exodus 6:14? Who was the firstborn of Israel? All right. Yep, Reuben it was. All right. Of what tribe was the family of Moses and Aaron? What tribe was, oh, wow. Everybody hit that one pretty quick. Very good. Last question, and we'll see who's got it. According to 620, who was the wife of Amram? Who was the wife of Amram? Jochebed, that's right, Jochebed. All right. Really appreciate you playing. Aaron took third. MBF, you came in second, and ABS got 7 out of 10. Very good. Much more detail in that set than last time. All right. Enough of that. Let's get on with class. So, last week, here's our expanded outline. We've touched on this a couple times now. We're now where the big bright green arrow is, God's promise of success. We're gonna talk about that today. And then there's a whole nother page to the outline. This is part 5. We'll get to that sometime later. So we're gonna go ahead and open up and look at Exodus chapter 6. So if you haven't turned there already, please do so. Exodus chapter 6. We're going to cover just a few verses today. We're going to read most of them right now up front. So if you turn there, read along with me. Now it came about on the day when the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I am the Lord. Speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I speak to you. But Moses said before the Lord, behold, I am unskilled in speech. How then will Pharaoh listen to me? Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? We get the sense in the way that this starts that there's a time gap between, a little bit of a time gap between here and the last set of verses, which we talked about last time. So Moses continues to be something around slightly unwilling. Then the Lord said to Moses, right? So he's encouraging Moses again. See, I make you as God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh, that he let the sons of Israel go out of his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that I may multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. When Pharaoh does not listen to you, then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring out my hosts, my people, the sons of Israel, from the land of Egypt by great judgments. The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand on Egypt and bring out the sons of Israel from their midst. So there's a particular phrase in our reading this morning, which is we're going to spend quite a bit of time on, because I think I've always taken it a little bit for granted. I'm not sure if you have as well, but it's something I think that's worth talking about. And that's, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. What's that mean? What does that mean?
To strengthen his resolve to do that which he thinks is right, but at the expense of others, that if he was a true and just king, he would have taken into consideration. Basically, he'll have no less than the mercy and grace that Pharaoh would have in his heart.
Yeah, Yeah, I think certainly there's an issue going on there in terms of the hardened heart, what a hardened heart looks like. And we'll get to that a little bit more. But the way that it's laid out, right, and the text says that God, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, right? So what do you think? Was it God that made his heart hard? I mean, that's what it says, right? Right.
Well, John,
Werner.
John, God wanted to manifest his works and his power over Pharaoh and the Egyptian gods. And he does that through those 10 plagues, which in an earlier class we talked about the gods of Pharaoh. God showed himself to be the one and only God. And he did that by hardening Pharaoh's heart. If Pharaoh would have just let him go right away, then that would not have been done. And then Israel would not have seen God's power.
Yeah, and this is where I get a little bit hung up. Because what would that... Sorry, go ahead, Werner.
John, I've always thought of when they said hardening people's heart, it just seems like it just made Pharaoh more stubborn, not able to listen to reason.
Yeah. I think this wound up kind of catching me a little bit, because what would this mean, right? I guess I'm looking at my slides and I made a mistake. Now that I'm looking at them, I don't think I can fix them in real time. What would it mean if it was God that let's see. Yeah, I really messed this particular slide up. I'm gonna go find it. All right, that might be a little better. Hopefully that'll work. All right, so what would it mean if his heart hadn't been hardened, right? What would it mean if Pharaoh's heart in this instance hadn't been hardened, right? Well, there'd be no miraculous plagues, right?
Well,
There wouldn't be a reason. They would have let him out right off. There would be no miraculous exodus. But the fact that his heart was hard allowed those things to happen. And it tells us that God was wanting to do those things, but it also would mean that God somehow would have completely overridden what Pharaoh wanted, right? And if God runs rampant over our desires and what we're trying to do, if he turned Pharaoh against his people, then God would have forced man to ruin his country and the deaths of countless people.
John?
Yeah.
I don't think that he did anything that wasn't in Pharaoh's nature to do anyway. I believe that Pharaoh was a stubborn man and wanted to do what he wanted to do. So I really feel that what God did was exactly what was in Pharaoh's nature to do anyway.
Yeah, I think so too. And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk down the other path for just a minute, and we'll come back there. So some people try to attribute this to a knowable sovereignty of God. God did this thing and forced Pharaoh to do things that were counter to, that ruined his country and killed a lot of people. But that leads us down some real interesting paths if we think that God can force us
John?
to do things. And that's not a place where I really think we ought to go. And so I think this sentence and this phrase within Exodus needs some additional context to figure out where we're going. Tony.
Yeah, I think in today's language, we would call it doubling down. When someone has a position and it's been it's been shown to them that it's wrong and stuff, instead of changing, they double down. They even become more convinced that they're right.
Yeah. Yeah, we see that a lot today. I think I'd have to think about that. One of the ways that that's relayed today is confirmation bias, right? If you're looking for a specific answer, then you'll find all of the evidence supports the answer you're looking for. And I think Pharaoh was probably subject to a fair bit of that. As he was looking to find some way to punish the Israelites, right? This is when we look back at the beginning of, I think it was in chapter 5, right? What does Pharaoh say when Moses asks for the 3 days? Oh, well, you're lazy, right? So he has some view of the Israelites that Moses's request seems to reinforce in some way, shape, or nature. And that's, if we go look at that, right? And I think this is an interesting little piece here, right? We had this whole adventure where Moses came and talked to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh did, said no and entered made it harder by, make bricks and get your own straw. But what was the purpose? Why did we need that piece? Why didn't we just jump to this part, right? It seems like an uninteresting part of the story, or at least, I think sometimes, the Bible, God gave us very limited amount of paper. It's a big book, sure, but he's got, so much space that he used. Every word in there is important. So why did we go through this little loop of failure before we got here? Because it seems like the lead up to that was the same, and the lead up to this was the same. So what's the purpose? Why did we have that loop? Anybody have thoughts on chapter 5? Why we have this extra meeting with Pharaoh before we get going again?
Well, it's kind of setting the scene to establish that that God has heard his people, and he wants Pharaoh to do something. And if you just come and say, "Why haven't you let my people go?" when you never even asked in the first place, it's like, then it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. You have to make the initial demand from God and establish that Pharaoh wasn't even willing to let them go for 3 days and come back. Pharaoh, he was not a reasonable person, and that chapter 5 establishes that principle, so they can see, oh, we didn't even let them go for 3 days to worship God and come back. And he says after that meeting, oh, you're lazy if you need to worship God. Like, my gods aren't good enough for you.
Right. Well, I certainly, there are some story components in there that build it up. We've got some learning from Moses. I think that's a lot of what we talked about when we had that particular class. But I think the other piece that goes with it, right, is it's showing Pharaoh's stubbornness. So importantly, if we go back and we look at that story, what's not there? What do we not have in chapter 5? It's missing. Sorry, that's a massively open-ended statement, right? So unfair to ask. But we're missing that statement. It didn't take, let's see, there's no mention of God hardening Pharaoh's heart before he says, I can't give you 3 days, right? This stubbornness was built in, right? Pharaoh was already massively stubborn. We've got that pretext. This wasn't God changing necessarily Pharaoh's nature.
John, it's about God demonstrating his almighty power in Moses' life, in Pharaoh's life. If you go ahead and read ahead, Exodus 9:16, he says to Pharaoh that for this purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you. In other words, God already saw the stubbornness of Pharaoh said, if you want that kind of heart, I can do that. I can make that happen. I can bring that to the top. It was the same for Moses. Moses didn't want to speak. He was tongue-tied. God said, for this purpose I have chosen you, that I might raise you up and demonstrate to you my power. It was the same kind of words in John 9 to the man who was born blind for this very purpose. This moment in time came about that I might demonstrate my power in you.
Yeah, I think it goes a bit farther. Let's keep rolling. I think there's a couple key things that I want to get to, because there's still concept that I don't like this concept that, and maybe it's not for me to like or dislike, right? But I have trouble reconciling God forcing Pharaoh to destroy his country. So we're gonna roll this a little bit farther, and then you guys can continue to tell me if I'm off base. I think a lot of times when we look at the Bible, we need expressions, that we need clarification on expressions, right? So if we flip over to Luke 14:26, it's the call from Jesus there to hate our father and mother, right? And that I think is relatively straightforward. We have lots of other material that tells us to honor our father and mother, obey our parents. And the point is, right, Jesus is trying to illustrate the cost of following him. He's not trying to undo the Old Testament, not saying that hate is the bottom line for your father and mother, but a reminder that he should be first over your father and mother. So I look for that kind of clarification for God hardening Pharaoh's heart, because it doesn't, we've got some contradiction about those pieces, because in Romans it tells us something different, right? In Romans, it tells us that they're professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures. And God gave them over in the lust of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them, for they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. And skipping forward, and just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper. These verses aren't directly back to Pharaoh, but they highlight the same kinds, the same issue, I think, which is here, that ultimately God knows our hearts, right? Knows the end of all things. And this section really reinforces to me that I don't think he forces us to choose one way or another, right? I don't think he forced Pharaoh to go do this. Rather, God allows us to do the things that we want to do, whether they're good for us or not. And I feel like, with Pharaoh's stubbornness, that this is really what's going on. God allows his heart to be hardened, but because that's what Pharaoh wants. And he showed it. He showed it repeatedly. And let's see. Let's see. I think this is going to wind up being looking ahead in my notes real quick.
Well, consider that while you're thinking about that, consider that God didn't, the scripture doesn't say that God hardened Pharaoh's heart until after the fifth plague. And
It does right here in the beginning of chapter 7. Oh, it says that God will harden
God
his
will,
heart.
not he
It
did.
hasn't happened yet.
That's why I say, until after the plague of the cattle, that's when it says God hardened his heart. Now there's two of those times before that says that Pharaoh hardened his heart. And the other three says that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. It doesn't say by what mechanism. You only see 3 times that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And then half the time it was Pharaoh's heart was hardened. So you'll see that it's not always, you don't always have the attribution of who's hardening Pharaoh's heart. Also, in the New Testament, where the passage talks about how God actually gave some people over to their sins, and the sins that were mentioned was among other things homosexuality, and depravity.
Right.
And there are people if they resist God, then God's going to say, well, okay, you want to resist me, okay, fine, you can go off and go to your sin where you want to be, and go ever deeper and farther from my love, if that's where you want to be.
So I think we've talked through this quite a bit, and what we're going to do is I'm going to scoot ahead a little bit and cover the last couple verses that we're going to cover today out of Exodus, unless anybody else has a specific note that they want to make about hardening of the heart.
We're muted. What? You want to help me? Okay.
All right, let's keep going. All right, so Exodus 7, verses 6 and 7. So Moses and Aaron did it as the Lord commanded them. Thus they did. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. All right, so let's see. What then do we want to take from this? I think one thing to keep in mind is God can still turn you over to your sin if that's what you choose or want. And I think there's a couple other examples of this in the Bible. So we're going to walk through a couple to kind of see how they went. King Saul, right? And they're both going to follow the same kind of activity. He disobeyed with the sacrifice that he offered, and then made choices from that disobedience. Right? He rejected the discipline, which would have been loss of his kingdom. He refused repentance. He didn't change, right? So far as to try and kill David, and continued to resist God's will. And ultimately, we know how it turned out for King Saul, right? He wound up not in a good spot. David had a similar kind of path, right? He disobeyed. But when it came to discipline, he received it, right? When he was confronted with the sin, he acknowledged it, sought forgiveness, right? And ultimately accepted God's will, even if it was certainly not what David had wanted.
John,
And that led to a different kind of heart in Psalm 32.
John,
Mhm.
if you will remember in the earlier years or days of King Saul, in order to help him, God gave him a different spirit to govern. But as we read and go on through the life story of King Saul, is he overrided that spirit, that gift from God, and chose the path that his heart wanted to go into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? No, I never thought of it that way, huh?
Oh, you're off mute, Sylvia, in case you weren't aware. All right, let's keep rolling.
Now, Saul.
So we're going to read through chapter 32 of Psalm. We're going to read Psalm 32. Psalm 32.
Hi, John.
Yeah.
That verse 7, it also gives us some indication that Miriam is probably at least 10 years older than Moses and Aaron, because Aaron's only 3 years older when Moses was a baby.
Mums.
And Miriam, she was old enough to follow him along and speak to Pharaoh's daughter.
Yep.
It is? I just filled it
All right.
a couple of days ago.
Hey, can you go on mute, please? Or Roger, if you could. All right. So Psalm 32. How blessed is he whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. How blessed is the man to whom the Lord does not impute iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. When I kept silent about my sin, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My vitality was drained away as with the fever heat of summer. I want you to be looking at kind of what David is going through here, because we're going to talk about, we're going to look at and talk a little bit about all of those pieces in a minute. I acknowledged my sin to you, and my iniquity I did not hide. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Salah. Therefore, let everyone who is godly pray to you in a time when you may be found. Surely in a flood of great waters, they will not reach him. You are my hiding place. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with songs of deliverance. Salah. I will instruct you and teach you in the way which you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Do not be as the horse or as the mule, which have no understanding, whose trappings include bit and bridle to hold them in check. Otherwise, they will not come near to you. Many are the sorrows of the wicked, but he who trusts in the Lord, loving kindness shall surround him. Be glad in the Lord and rejoice, righteous ones, and shout for joy, all you who are upright in the heart. So tell me about what David went through here. What are the kinds of things that you see from David's choice and path from disobedience and back through the tender heart? What did Psalm 32 tell us? What kinds of things did David go through?
His bones wasted away.
Yeah.
When he was trying to hide the sin, his bones were wasting away, and he groaned all day long because the sin was weighing on him. Then God also was subtly letting him know that he was in error and he had sinned. It says in American Standard, it says, "My moisture was changed."
Yeah.
Versus with the drought of summer. Well, basically he got dehydrated. He wasn't.
Yeah.
He was sweating, and but he needed more. But he was going out of his strength. It was too hot.
Yeah, he suffered quite a bit, didn't he? What else? What else do we see? We've got suffering peace. What else did David go through? What kinds of experiences did he have?
Confessed his sin.
He confessed, yeah. And when he confessed his sin, how does the Psalm 32 tell us that went?
I acknowledged my sin to thee, and my iniquity I did not hide. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and thou didst forgive my guilt.
Yeah. And I think you continue on a little bit. It feels like relief, right? And once he's got that relief, the tone changes again, towards the end, towards resolution, right? But he who trusts in the Lord, loving kindness shall surround him. And so, let's see. I think the bottom line, this next chart seems pretty good.
Talking about Psalm 30.
Yep. So I think there's a couple realities, right? And we look at Saul and David and Pharaoh, and that's really, resisting God, resisting his will is going to harden your heart, right? Believing is going to lead to a desire for God's will and looking for you to put that into your life. Let's see. I want to jump to the second lesson. We're going to be done way in advance, so you'll have some time to talk amongst yourselves. My apologies, I'm not used to my classes going infinitely short, but this one will. So the other lesson, that second verse, with God, it's never too late to be useful. Aaron was 83. Moses was 80. We were talking about Miriam being older than that. And, certainly look around. I'm sure look to your left and right. There are some more experienced Christians around the church. It's never too late to do something for God, to serve God, to make sure that you're putting his will into action in your life. And the reminder, I like this reminder that the individual who built most of the slides put in, that what limits you doesn't limit him. Right? So even if you've got limitations, if you are not eloquent of speech, as Moses frequently complains of being at 80 years old, I'm certain there is still something that God can do to use you for his glory. All right, there you have it. Next week, we're going to get into the plagues. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you joining. Apologize for the bumpiness of virtual class. It's been a long time since we've had to run a class remotely from Zoom, but I really appreciate you sticking with it. Hope you enjoy the rest of the extra gap that I'll give you between now and when services start at the bottom of the hour. Thank you very much for your participation.